what I want to discuss today is what is the actual value of grading collectibles. I deal mostly in cards, but this should apply for any type of collectible. So I got a whiteboard here, and I'm just going to go through these topics with you guys real quick. And that's cards. That's TCG cards or sports cards or non-sports, non-TCG cards, whatever. Comics, video games, currency, whatever that can be graded. So there's two types of customers, resellers and collectors. Now, what do each of these groups want? Well, resellers want to make more money, and they get that by selling to collectors, ultimately. Whether or not it's sellers selling to sellers that then sell to sellers, eventually it's supposed to trickle down to the collectors. And as far as I can tell, there are 4 possible reasons a collector would want graded cards. And we'll just go over 1, 2, 3, and 4 here. The first would be the aesthetics, how the card looks in the encapsulation provided by the grading service. The second would be an objective guarantee of authenticity. Thirdly would be an objective guarantee or an objective determination of the condition, i.e. the grade. And fourthly would be a guarantee of the preservation of the collectible in its current state. Now, I'm not going to discuss the aesthetics because that is entirely subjective and up to the collector, whether they like this slab versus that slab, whether they like slabs versus any of the other preservation and encapsulation methods as far as the way they look. That are available without having to send it off to get it graded. So we're not going to bother with that one because it's not really going to enter into this discussion. We are going to be concerned with these 3 though. Okay, so I've just moved these up here into the corner so we can keep them in mind. What we're going to look at next is the steelman argument, and the steelman argument is hopefully, unless somebody can give me a stronger argument, the strongest possible argument for grading that I can come up with. The steelman argument is as follows. Grading services processes are as objective as possible. The protective encapsulation that they put them in is the best insurance of preservation. Value comes from the confidence provided by these above. That is, that they've met conditions 2, 3, and 4. A highly graded collectible item is therefore more valuable than a raw version of the same item by means of the grade being relatively uncommon and by means of these processes having been carried out to ensure the item's authenticity, its condition as stated, and its preservation in that condition. But do they, though? Do the processes that the grading services carry out actually meet these conditions of authenticity, condition, and preservation? Like I said, the grading services will be the first to tell you that their processes of authentication and conditioning are as objective as possible. But these processes depend entirely on humans. And it's not just humans feeding cards into machines that then make the determination. They depend on humans' value judgments. Now, the problem with this is there are actually 3 similar but distinct problems with this. Humans make mistakes. Humans have unconscious biases. and humans have conscious biases. So what do I mean by these things? Let's just take the first step here. Humans make mistakes. There are lots of well-renowned stories of, not just within this system, but any type of system that is supposed to be making objective judgments, but it is entirely the humans making value judgments. There are bound to be mistakes that happen. Humans are human. They can't help but be human. Humans make mistakes. It is within the card authenticating world. There's lots of stories, lots of evidence of mislabeled cards, of authenticated cards that turned out to be fake, all kinds of things like that. So, like, there's, for instance, Topps Chrome cards that are labeled as Topps paper. There's rebacked Magic beta cards that are they're labeled as Magic beta cards, but they're rebacked collector's edition cards that had the corners trimmed. That have made it through authentication at major grading services. I'm not calling out any one particular grading service. I'm calling out the principle of grading by human judgment. The Logan Paul authenticated case of base set Pokemon booster boxes that turned out to have G.I. Joe cards inside it was a very, very highly publicized such mistake. So, yeah, grading companies deal with large quantities, and the number of mistakes that they make is very significantly smaller than the number of non-mistakes that they make. But there are enough mistakes, and there are no efforts to pull the human nature of those mistakes out of the process, that doubt exists. Authenticity is not effectively guaranteed by having something looked at by a grading service. How about unconscious biases? This deals more with the grades than with the authenticity. Looking again at the various grading services processes reveal that virtually all of them depend on value judgment by humans. It's not just, running it through a machine to check the edges, and having a machine determine the corners, and having a machine look at the surfacing and the edge wear and things like that. It is a human looking at it and seeing a flaw and then determining how much that flaw impacts the eye appeal of the card. So if the centering is off by a certain amount, but it doesn't look that bad in this human's eyes, it may not get as bad of a negative grade as the next card. That's an oversimplification, of course. I don't work for a grading company, obviously, but that is the basic idea of how the grading services work. They look at it, they look for flaws. The flaws are then determined to see how much they impact what the card looks like. That is the basis for the grade. So whatever the services claim as to the objectivity of their grading processes, it is documented that there exists variance in those grading results. This is not just between services like CGC versus PSA versus BGS versus SGC, and all these other three-letter grading service names, but also within the same company's grading. Again, there's plenty of stories of and plenty of evidence available of cards receiving obviously wrong grades, being resubmitted, and getting different grades. How can this occur? How can this be true? These aren't, for the most part, wild swings, though there are some cases of wild swings. Generally, it's 9s become 9.5s, or 8s become 9s, or 9.5s become 10s, or something like that. Flaws don't just disappear, they don't just appear or not get noticed. But perfect cards, according to one grading system, should be perfect to all of them. Perfect is perfect, right? Cards should be what they are, but one service will consistently grade these cards at a 9, and if they get submitted to the next service, they'll be a 10. And people certainly do resubmit cards back to the same grading service over and over again until they get the grade that they want. This is well known that it happens. And this happens because explicitly the grading services aren't arriving at the grade determination based solely on objective criteria. Can you really tell me that a human can tell the difference consistently and repeatedly between 5 graded corners and 6 graded corners, 3 graded edgeware versus 4 graded edgeware, 9 edgeware versus 9.5 edgeware? There's a lot of room in these processes for human bias to creep in. All manner of outside forces can influence the human's mind on that day that they're making the determination of the grades for those cards. You know, if not on purpose, not intentionally, if these biases aren't accounted for by some type of double-blind system or some other type of non-human system like an AI grading or something like that, then the claim of objective grading can't be held consistently. And this is borne out by the blurred lines between grades, both within and among the grading services. And what about conscious biases? It's of course possible with the relative lack of transparency that most grading services have for, not good faith intent to skew and corrupt the grading processes as well. There obviously aren't a lot of documented cases of this because this would have to mean somebody is caught red-handed, though I will touch on one in a minute. But note that the current situation in which grades aren't 100% reliable is actually can be argued to be beneficial to the grading services because their standard industry-wide response to those people who disagree with a grade that a card or a comic or whatever receives is to resubmit it, pay again to have it looked at again, and we'll give it another grade, or we'll grade it again, and hey, maybe it'll be a different grade this time. That's the standard response. Now there is like a grade guarantee PSA at least has on their website. I haven't seen all of them. But it feels kind of shady. If you grade a card or a comic or whatever, you aren't the one who's allowed to appeal the grade. It's only if you get it second hand or something. It's really weirdly worded. I don't quite understand how it works, but that's where it is. Their standard response is just resubmit, and we'll see if it gets the same grade or not. Now, there has been, like I said, a recent example of potential bad behavior by a grading service. Just happened a couple of months ago. This was in the comic books world. You may not be super familiar with it, but it's a scandal called the so-called acetate gate scandal. This involved, from what I can understand, there was a comic book shop that collaborated with the artist for a comics cover, a particularly hot comic book, to create new artwork on acetate sheets that would then go over the original cover and to modify the original cover's artwork. And that was the original artist modifying their own artwork, yes. How it relates to grading is that these covers were then stapled onto the existing book as released, as published by Marvel, then were sent off to CGC, the biggest comic book grading service. They've recently gotten big in Pokemon as well in the last couple of years. So they were then submitted to CGC and received a disproportionate number, extremely high grades, despite them being basically altered from their original form without approval from the publisher, as well as now having extra holes in them from when they've added staples to staple these covers onto the original book. Why did CGC grade them as authentic at all? Why did they grade them with such high grades? Why did they basically say that they're as close to pristine as possible? Either they made the exact same mistake or several mistakes in a row hundreds of times as they graded these books, or else they did so on purpose. That covers authenticity and condition. I don't have as much to say on preservation. Grading service encapsulation is definitely not the only way to preserve and protect your collectibles for the long term. You can buy from BCW and lots of other places, lots of things that will protect your cards and comics and things for hundreds of years. They don't have to be encapsulated in a hermetically sealed container, or you can do that your own self. You don't really need a grading service to do that for you. Also, there is documented evidence of collectibles inside the encapsulations, especially vintage comics, vintage cards, that degrade while in the encapsulation, especially from things like light. Sometimes things move around. You know, comics are made of several sheets of paper together. They can, you know, warp and move around and slide against themselves inside the encapsulation if they get jostled enough. There have been several videos of put out of cards inside slabs that have been shaken and things like that. I think someone built one out of Legos to shake their slabbed cards, and that they then cracked them open to see the damage on the cards, and there was observable difference in condition of the card. Encapsulation by the grading services is also still not necessarily the most beneficial way to preserve your collectibles long term. Why grade? Why is this a service that exists? My opinion, this is opinion, not fact at this point. My opinion is that grading was embraced by sellers as a set of selling points. When selling their collectibles to collectors, it doesn't really serve the collector, it serves the seller in providing arbitrage predicated on the collector's ignorance of thinking that authenticity, condition, and preservation are what they're getting. Collectors aren't getting insurance of 2, 3, or 4. Collectors have been duped into being the greater fools. And that's my opinion of grading cards. I honestly believe that the grading services do not accurately provide with well enough determination and consistency the things that they claim to provide to collectors, and that sellers instead utilize that belief that the grading services have instilled in the collectibles market to arbitrage their cards into more valuable cards while not actually adding the value that they claim to add. In my opinion, it would be best to only pick up cards in raw form. I only sell cards in raw form. I'm not looking to buy graded cards at all. I wasn't ever really to begin with, as I deal in bulk. I'm not really looking to buy bulk slabbed cards ever or anything like that. I am very content selling my 5 and 10 and 20 cent cards. This is a big part of the reasoning why I didn't move into graded cards and the high end of the market. So what do you guys think about graded cards? I would love to hear any feedback on what I'm saying. I would love to hear what I would love to talk about this. If you have any problems with anything I've said, please feel free to leave a comment. If you agree, if you like what I'm saying, you want to hear more of the things I have to say, make sure you subscribe so I can do that. And if you are looking to understand a little bit more about the bulk market, then watch this video I've got put up over here. That'll help you understand that.